Hello and welcome to episode 1 of The Quiet Exit. I'm your host, Monique LaSalle's, psychology researcher and author of an upcoming book titled Seen and Unheard. Today we're diving into a question that sounds simple, but far more layered than most people realize. And the question is, what is narcissistic abuse? So let's start with this. Narcissistic abuse isn't just a bad breakup. It's not just drama. It's not just someone being arrogant or selfish. Narcissistic abuse is a pattern, a repeated, strategic erosion of your reality, your identity, and emotional safety. And the most dangerous part is it's often so subtle. It doesn't look like abuse until it's already done damage. The kind of abuse you can receive from romantic partners, but also from a parent, a friend, a sibling, a coworker, your boss, or a spiritual leader. Because it's not about love. It's about absolute control. So before I jump into defining narcissistic abuse, I just want to say this. Yes, is the term used loosely? Yes, it is. I know when I first started hearing the term used, probably about 2017, 2018, it had become saturated on social media specifically. And then it morphed into people just labeling or calling others narcissistic for just being upset with them, or for that person being a bit arrogant or conceited or in their ego. It diluted the definition of the word narcissist, or labeling someone to be narcissist, because to be frank, that's what you're doing. You are labeling a person. However, I found that because the term is used so loosely, it negates the survivors who experienced the harm caused by true narcissistic individuals, those who have the narcissistic pattern of behaviors, or diagnosed or undiagnosed NPD, or narcissistic personality disorder. Initially, was I offended? Yes. I have since learned that the term narcissist is pretty much become a bucket term. And you throw in that bucket every poor behavior or quote unquote bad behavior that causes harm to a relationship. I am not one to say whether that's good or bad. I am going to say, to understand what a narcissist is a person with a pattern of poor relational behaviors. And I'll deep dive maybe further on in some later episodes, defining narcissism, narcissist, the spectrum, and Also, the dark triad being narcissistic personality disorder, sociopath, and psychopath in a later episode. I want to touch today on the abuse. So to define the abuse, I would say that it is a pattern of psychological and emotional manipulation characterized by gaslighting, invalidation, chronic blame shifting, charm as control, triangulation, and there's that intermittent reinforcement, that push-pull dynamic. Again, a pattern of continuous behavior. It usually follows this cycle of idealization, devaluation, discard, and then the inevitable hoover, which is to pull you back in to start the cycle of idealization, discard, or devalue and discard all over again. But at its core, narcissistic abuse erodes the individual's sense of self. It makes you doubt your instincts, your memory, and your self-worth. According to the DSM-5, narcissistic personality disorder is a clinical diagnosis that includes grandiosity, lack of empathy, and a need for admiration. But you don't need a diagnosis to experience the harm. Most survivors were never abused by someone with a diagnosis. They were abused by someone with patterns, maladaptive relational patterns. And it doesn't always look like abuse, right? Many survivors didn't even know they were being abused because the abuser seemed so charming, yet wounded, funny, powerful, successful, or spiritual. Narcissistic abuse tends to hide behind love bombing and things just being a joke, quote unquote. It hides behind toxic positivity, religious indoctrination, or crisis-based bonding. It looks like caretaking. It looks like passion. It looks like connection until it doesn't. What makes it so insidious is that the abuse is psychological. The scars are invisible. And when you try to name what happened, people often don't believe you. Because the person who hurt you has built such a persona that says otherwise. So let me unpack what makes this harmful. Is that the most dangerous part of narcissistic abuse isn't the yelling, right? It's the slow psychological erosion of self and identity. You become someone who walks on eggshells, who questions everything you say or feel. You apologize for things you weren't at fault for. You may feel numb, confused, anxious, or deeply ashamed, and you don't even know why. This is what trauma researcher Jennifer Freud said. She calls this betrayal blindness. It's when your brain needs to stay attached to the person hurting you. So it suppresses the full truth of what's happening. And how do you know you're experiencing it? You start to ask yourself questions. And those questions could be, why do I feel so off, but I can't explain it? Why do I feel guilty for having boundaries? Why do I feel bad for having an opinion? Why do I feel ashamed and ungrateful for wanting to live my own life? Why am I grieving someone who never really saw me? And those questions, those are the signs. Narcissistic abuse isn't about the words. It's about how you feel over time. Again, it's a pattern of behaviors. You may feel small, confused, unworthy, powerless, and grateful for the little crumbs you're offered. I'm going to close with a reflection for you. If you've experienced narcissistic abuse, know this. The fact that you're even asking the question means you're waking up. And that matters. It's all that matters. You don't need anyone's permission to call what happened to you abuse. You don't need a diagnosis to validate your pain. You get to name your experience, you get to leave, and you get to heal. And you get to do it quietly, without permission, without guilt, and without looking back. Until next time, take the quiet exit if you need to. You don't owe anyone the performance of staying.